Hey, Monica, did you know it's now even easier to listen to Round the Hay Bale podcast?
What? Really? How easy?
That's right. All you have to do is say, Alexa, play Round the Hay Bale podcast.
Playing Round the Hay Bale podcast on Apple Music.
Ooh, we're really fancy now.
Tune in to Round the Hay Bale every Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time.
Grab a cup of joe and let's gather round that hay bale. With your hosts, Ann from Andale Homestead, Cayce from Ormsby Farms, Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch, and Sandi from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. Here they are. Hey, y'all, hey.
Hey, y'all. Hey, it's Ann with Andale Homestead.
Hey, everyone, it's Cayce over at Ormsby Farms.
I'm Monica with Bland's Promised Land Ranch.
Good morning. This is Sandi from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona.
And if you're listening through our podcast apps, but you want to see our faces, head on over to our YouTube channel, Round the Hay Bale. We love reading all those great comments and that you leave us, and it helps algorithm and getting our podcast out to more like-minded people. You can find us, our YouTube channel of Round the Hay Bale, by clicking our LinkTree link down below. And you can take over and check out our social media links and click on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of us. And now for today's episode, Sandi is going to tell us all about fodder.
Well, that's right. Today it's all about fodder. And actually, I want you to know this is going to be a boredom buster. You may not think fodder is exciting. Why would you use it? What are you going to do? But today's episode is going to be really interesting because we're going to talk about food stuff for all of your animals, from hay and straw to duckweed and spent grains that we can just add to give more nutrients to our animals, and a lot of times for free. So, Monica, have you ever used fodder before?
Well, apparently I've used fodder more than I realize. I think we were talking a little bit ago about what exactly is fodder. And I thought fodder was just growing that grass in your buckets and giving it to your chickens and ducks and all that. I had no clue that fodder was a more general term, and it was referring to feed for livestock, especially like the coarsely ground hay or straw, or any of our birds and chickens and ducks and all this stuff. So yeah, I've used fodder in the past. I've used fodder specifically that I've grown, at least that I knew of, when a few years ago we started making our own fodder. We soaked the grains and then we let them sprout, and we were just kind of pulling it off like a sheet for the chickens and the ducks and the turkeys, for them to have some extra grass to grow, to eat, when the seasons were a little sparse on the actual grass growing on the ground. So we do that a lot of times in late fall and late summer, when everything's crunchy and brown. They need something that's a little more green. And so we do that for our animals. So yes, I have done fodder for my stuff. Now, Cayce, have you ever done fodder?
You know, right before this episode, all I could think of is our fodder who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Because I have like this much experience and this much knowledge on it, but I want so very much to learn more about it, because everybody talks about having it for your chickens, as you said, when the seasons die down, and we may be super excited because we don't have to mow the grass anymore, but the chickens and the turkeys who are overwintering aren't really excited about that. So I'm super excited to learn. Y'all gonna see me looking down a lot because I have my notes for the ones that actually get to see our faces now. This is so cool that they can see our faces. If you see us looking down, most of the time it's because we're taking notes from the topic. So what about you, Ann? I know that we talked a little bit before the episode, and you've grown a little bit in some fun little grow cups that Sandi sent us.
I do have it right here beside me. For those that are listening, do switch over to our YouTube and you'll be able to see I've got these little cups where I just had some bird seed and I threw it in the dirt, and it grew in like a week and a half. It was that large. So I put the whole pot in with the chickens, and they eat it up in like 10 or 15 minutes. But the thought of fodder to me, and I know very, very little about fodder, had to goggle it before we got on here, had to figure out what was going on, is the price of food sometimes goes crazy. Our weather systems all over our country and our world have gone nuts. And so sometimes we need to be able to supplement our food or potentially have to be able to feed our animals food other than what comes from the store. And so it was very interesting to me to find out more things that fodder is more than just grass growing in a pot. It is all types of grains and things like that, right, Sandy?
It is. There's certain grains, if you're going to do it like Anne's doing it, that you're going to soak the seeds. I usually soak mine 6 to 8 hours first. You don't have to use soil. You can use soil. It's not right or wrong, but you don't have to. A lot of times I
Right.
save these little containers that when you go to a restaurant, right? And if you can kind of in the wintertime or whenever you're supplementing, for me, it's wintertime because we have a lot of cold and ice. I do like a 8 to 10 day rotation so that I'm always having different containers at different um, heights of it.
Right.
So if you would go and buy, say, an organic 50-pound bag of wheat, right? Because you do want it organic. You don't want GMO. You want it so that it's really healthy for your animals.
Right.
And if you did this rotation, that 50 pounds of wheat would give you over 200 pounds of fodder.
Wow.
So that is a great increase for the health of your, say, chickens or cows or pigs, ducks, whatever you're feeding. But there are a few other places to look for free fodder that you might not have thought about. Any waste products from, like, if there's a sugar beet farm by you, straw, fish meal, molasses. Sometimes, depending on where you live in the country, there might be companies that are doing things and they have extra stuff that isn't usable for them, but it is usable for your animals. Like brewer's yeast. Or if there's a brewery, like if there's a lot of micro breweries around the country right now, they have waste products. The only thing I would be careful of, don't give it too much at one time to your animals because it does have alcohol content.
Would be wobbling around.
Some drunk chickens.
But like Monica, do you have a pond on your property?
Yes, we do. We have a tank in the back of the property.
Does it ever get like duckweed on there, that little teeny plant? That's a
Yes.
fodder.
Okay.
So you can just scoop it off with either like a fishing net that's real fine or spoons that are slotted and give that to your chickens or your ducks.
Yeah, see, I think so you had described too the way, like, we don't do anything with dirt when we make fodder. So a couple years ago we had used those like metal trays, the ones you have like when you can get them at like Walmart or whatever. You have the empty metal trays, they're like the aluminum, and I poked holes in the bottom of them, really tiny little holes. And then I would basically sprout my grains. I would put like wheat. I'd buy a big bag of wheat, or I would do barley sometimes, depending on what was cheaper. And I would throw that into a big bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket. I would let it kind of soak overnight. I do it in the evening, let it soak overnight. And then I would take it the next morning and spread it out into that aluminum container or whatever containers I had. I'd put some holes in the bottom of it, and then I would let it sit on these racks. I actually had one of those kind of like greenhouses that I bought with the trays outside, and I would have it covered. Now in Texas, you don't usually need a greenhouse to make things warm, but because I had started doing it in late fall, it was cooler outside. So that little plastic greenhouse sheeting, I kind of got it from Big Lots or whatever. It was really cheap. It was on sale, end of season. I used it and I stuck all my trays in that, and they had the racks, and so they would drain out onto one another as we would kind of keep them moist. The water would drain into one another and just drain down into the very bottom pan, which was an empty water pan. And I would just take and use that to kind of water it during the next couple of days. but it only took a few days for them to start to sprout. And as one tray was empty, I would feed it and then I would refill it. So we started having a cycle of all of them. The only problem that we had is that it tended to, when it was a really warm day, we would start to notice some mold. So we started being really careful and mindful of how often we fed it or how long we would let it sprout. But we was a really good system for a while there, and it works really great. But we didn't use any soil. We only just took the sprouted grains and just stuck it in the bottom in a thin layer, and you would be able to peel that up like
Yep.
a carpet. It was amazing. And I would just peel it up and toss it out in like a big square, like a carpet square. And I would throw them out there. And I'd usually have about 3 or 4 of them at the same exact time. And I put them in different areas. And I even fed them to the pigs because the pigs love fresh grass. They don't always get a chance to free range or pasture graze. And so to throw it in for the pigs, it's phenomenal. They love it and they eat it up so fast. That's one of the things we always did.
So I have a question about that. And you have to have holes in the bottom of the containers, or
Well, I poked the holes in there because it allows the excess moisture to drain out and keep it from getting moldy. And I feel like the ones that were molding were the ones that were continuing to keep that water in there longer. But it worked great. I mean, we would kind of make sure that they were watered. I mean, I haven't done it for years. But it was a really great system. We loved doing it. The kids were kind of enjoying it at the time. And it was something that worked for us as an extra source to supplement their feed. Now we use a lot of the fermented feed, and we try to take our feed now and add water to it to swell it and to ferment it. So that's been a system that we've used to, add nutrients into their feed. But I mean, honestly, the grains, it's an extra purchase. So if you're looking to purchase something extra, but it does multiply itself, like Sandi said. I mean, a cup of the grains, once it's sprouted, it becomes something so much more.
Right.
And it's great nutrient wise. I believe the nutrient density is you just really increase your animal's nutrition value right there.
Now, question, because if people are listening, getting the barley or the oats, is that the wheat? Can you get that from like your big box store, or where would somebody go to get like the bag barley and all that kind of stuff?
I usually go. There's a company that ships nationwide now. It's called Azer Standard, and they just come. I think it's once a month here in Wyoming, and I go to the semi, pick it up. But it's organic, it's GMO, it doesn't have any GMOs on it. And the nice thing about it, when you do those sprouts, think of it as microgreens for your animals.
That's
right?
exactly it.
And it becomes 40% digestible. And because when they eat grains, there's lots of it that isn't digested. And so once it gets, you got your wheat and it's 6 inches tall or 8 inches tall, they can digest 40% of that, which is huge, really.
It is. That's good.
Yeah, I didn't think of it as your standard because I know that I get some stuff from them. So it was good that you mentioned that, because now I'm going to look for the barley and
wheat. You could, if they don't deliver, you can probably order from Amazon as well if you're really wanting to go. I know I went on Amazon. You can buy smaller bags if you want to try it. You can probably find smaller bags of wheat, like whole wheat, or the whole barley, things like that. But you want to find it the whole. You don't want to find it that cracked stuff, because you're not going to get the whole seed, because you want that seed to sprout. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of places you can get it from. And if you're struggling, you can always reach out to us. You can leave comments on this podcast video if you really have some questions and you're really struggling. You're like, look, I really want to try that. Where do I go? Ask us. We can try to help you out any way we can, especially because we have some resources that we know about. So yeah, email us or even leave comments asking questions, and we'll get back to you to let you know what we know, at least. And if we don't know the answers, somebody can find it for you.
We'll find somebody that does know the answers.
Exactly.
There's lots of feed stores. Your extension office might know somebody that actually is growing it, that sells it also. So there's lots of options. Go to a farmer's market and talk to them and see who they know that are farmers.
Okay. Okay, that's encouraging because we have I live in a little bitty town, and so our farmers market might not have that, but somebody there might know someone. And as your standard doesn't come to this neck of the woods, it's like a 3-hour drive to get
Oh,
to
okay.
their tractor trailer. But to be able to potentially order off of Amazon or to know what to look for when I do go out because I really hadn't paid any attention as far as what to purchase for something like that.
Didn't you say, Miss Ann, what did you use for your grain for your fodder that you're growing?
Birdseed. And
So
we
you just
got
use bird seed. I mean, you can get bird seed at Walmart. You
yeah,
can get,
and that's what we did. We
I
get
mean,
it's cheaper at Tractor Supply, but just
sure.
saying. We
But
get
if
it
it's
in big
something that
giant
someone,
bags.
yeah, if it's something that someone wants to try for their animals, I mean, you don't have to live on a farm, you don't have to live on a homestead, a community, whatever. You don't have to live on a bigger piece of property or anything like that to do something like this. Maybe you have some small birds, maybe you have one or two backyard chickens and you
Right.
want to try something for them. This is something you can do on a smaller scale as well. It doesn't have to be trays and bins, and you don't have to have, I won't divulge how many birds that I have on my property, but you don't have to have the amount of birds that I have on my property to be able to do this, or pigs or whatever.
That's right.
There's lots of ways to do it. So, okay, Sandy. So besides the fodder that we would grow, what else is fodder? You're saying like the duckweed. I mean, where else can you find fodder around your property?
Duckweed. If you grow an overabundance of like rutabagas or turnips, that is something that they consider fodder because a lot of times farmers will grow an acre of that and then feed it, supplement that to their cattle or their pigs. If you do cover crops over top of your garden, um, most of the time I leave the root in the soil and I that just feeds the microbes, but that top part I can trim down and give it as fodder also. So I think sometimes we're just not really realizing the scope of fodder. We
Right.
think of it, we just thought it was something that we soaked the grains and we grew that. But straw, hay, any kind of sprouted grains is actually a fodder too, even if you don't grow it. So like if you were like you sprout grains to put on your salad, that is still fodder. If you have an area it's usually a wet area, and maybe you got willows coming up or bushes, and you want to trim those small ones, that becomes fodder because your animals will eat them.
That's
You know,
so
especially when they're tender, that's probably the best time. If you had goats, the goats will eat them anytime.
yeah. Well, we had also talked about, we are a farming community through here. And so you drive through and you see fields and fields and fields of corn that is dry as, I mean, it ain't nobody eating that corn, no human eating that corn. But what was it that they could do with that?
Well, there's a field corn, which is different than what the corn that we eat. And so, like by my grandma's farm when we grew up, there were these silos that only had wire around them instead of the metal. And you would see cobs of corn in there, and they would feed that in the wintertime. It's
Yeah.
hard, it's crunchy, but the cattle will and the pigs will eat it anyway.
Right.
So, but they'll eat the whole stalk. A lot of times, a farmer will release them into an area, and they'll just eat. The cows and pigs will eat everything that's the stalks above that, even though they're brown, and that
Oh
would
my
be
gosh.
fodder.
That's
Wow.
so interesting to me.
Yeah, that's really neat. So I guess fodder, really the term is just the extra stuff you're feeding your animals to supplement their nutritional needs.
It is a feed supplement. You
Okay.
can't just feed fodder,
Yeah.
you know. But you can, in the wintertime, it's cold here in Wyoming. So when I would do it, I would just set up a rack, and I'd have lights, just my shop lights. I don't buy any extra things. They're just the shop lights that I start my plants with. And I would do my trays. And so that I could just lift that up, and it is just like carpet. And I would give that to the chickens. Sometimes I'd fold it in half, uh, and it would bend down, and the chickens would peck at both sides until it was all gone.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think your animals appreciate that green in the wintertime,
Mhm.
because like we supplement with the chickens, they get so much in the summertime. But if you really want them to lay more, you got to give them more in the wintertime.
That's right. That's right.
I did notice that as we don't get terribly cold here. We get pretty cold sometimes, but I did notice on those seasons before when we were feeding that extra, when we were making sure that they had those sprouted grains, they had the fodder, they were laying longer season wise, and they were really their eggs were so beautiful and so nutritious. Like they tasted better than I think that normally, because their egg, the yolk consistency. Now we're just going back to chickens and ducks here, but the yolks on a chicken and duck egg look different depending on the season.
Right.
I know, at least here, right? So in the summertime, we feed them, we throw grains out for them, we throw them some feed, but we throw pellets, but we don't throw as much as we do in maybe the winter or whatever, because they're eating so many more critters. They're eating all those little bugs. They're
Right.
free ranging so much, and they're eating all those grasses and all those things that are available in the spring and summer. And as late summer gets, you'll see the grass get crunchier and they need more because some of those bugs are just not there that were earlier in the season. And so we'll start to see their yolks change. And as I start to notice that, that's when we know they need more supplement. So we try to throw in mealworms or other things as well. But, fodder is such a great available commodity. It's something available that we can do to help them with their nutrition value so that it helps us with what we're consuming. It just makes sense to give them that extra. And I do know it affects what they put out. So if you're looking for really good quality eggs, giving them some extra in the winter months is probably the best thing you could do for them.
Right. And what I've learned here today is we don't necessarily have to grow. You don't have to give yourself a week and a half or 2 weeks. There's all kinds of things that are all around us all the time. I mean, I have a creek in my backyard. Yes, there's grass that's growing in the top of that I could scoop up and give to them, or any of those other items. It's easy. Trust me, it's easy peasy to grow it. But if you are not able to do that, or you need something today and you don't want to wait a week, then there's things around that you can use that are growing that you can still feed your animals to help supplement.
Yeah, sometimes as gardeners, we go through and we have all of these old seeds, and the older a seed gets, the percentage of its germination, it goes down. It's true, it does. But if you just every once in a while cull all of those seeds can become fodder for you. You can grow them in trays and give them to your animals. You're just going to let them grow, from 3 inches to 4 inches high, because that's when the most nutrients are in there, just like a microgreen. And you're just going to give them to your animals instead.
That's so cool. That's so, I mean, but tomato seeds are not, because tomato plants or something
Right.
about tomato plants are weird. So make sure you do your research.
Right.
when-
But you could do peas and radishes and broccolis and cabbages. The nightshades are what you wouldn't want to do. You wouldn't want to do tomatoes or peppers, things like that, because
Mhm.
the fruit is good, but that plant is not.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's where the research comes in, or you can comment in our videos and on our podcast and let us know what your questions are and how you feel like you might be able to reap the rewards of things already in your yard or around your house. I mean, Casey, isn't this amazing? You and I both knew nothing about it before this started.
My mind was completely blown. Like I'm sitting over here thinking, I'm like, okay, I need to go through my seed packets now, and besides the tomato and peppers, see which ones are a little older on the side. But I mean, I'm like Monica. We don't get super cold here over the winter. I mean, there are, that rare time that we get like maybe 20 degrees, which for Sandi is probably not as cold as she gets. But thinking of how I can make sure that I take care of my girls over the winter, because we have our egg layers, we will have our American breasts, we have our meat turkeys, all are our meat turkey breeders that are going to need to be surviving over the winter. So finding different ways to do fodder and to supplement their feed, so I'm not spending an arm and 2 legs to
Right.
buy more feed over the winter. So this is just
Yes,
kind
it
of
is
kind of
true.
moments. Huh?
So one of the things I was reading was, I guess the easiest way to put it is, fodder is the food you feed your animals, and forage is what your animals go to eat and they feed themselves. So I guess
Right.
so if you feed your animals, like if you have, let's just say you have goats or you have milk cows on there. If you feed your animals extra, like let's just say you feed your chickens and your pigs and all that extra cow's milk or goat's milk, if you feed them extra milk and you add that milk or that yogurt or whatever into their diet, that's considered fodder, right?
Yeah.
It's extra. So if you're feed anything extra, you're feeding your animal that you're growing or you're producing, that you feed your animal, is considered fodder. So it doesn't have to be that hard. Like thinking it, I guess it just seems like it's a hard word and it's different and it's not something you're used to thinking of as more than just growing some wheatgrass in a container and giving it to your animal. That's like literally what I thought fodder was. And now I'm like, mind is blown here. Like you said, Cayce, it's just like there's a lot more to it. And there's a lot of things you can do. Mealworms added to their, maybe you don't grow plants, but maybe you grow the worms. Maybe, there's a lot of
Right.
people that grow the mealworms and they grow the black soldier fly larva. And these are things that you can do on your property, wherever you are, in your home. A lot of people grow worms in their house.
Right.
Not me, but if that's you, that's
Not
awesome.
I.
That is awesome. If
I
there's
haven't
worms,
yet, but it sounds like a lot of fun,
yeah, if
actually.
there's worms in my house, it's not on purpose. Just saying.
And you will be surprised if you have like a feed store by you. There's a lot of times you can buy a bag of molasses. It's dried molasses, and a lot of people will add that to their soil because it helps the microbes, but you can actually add that to the feed too, and it helps your animals, because a lot of cow ranchers will add molasses. So,
Okay.
so walk around your feed store and just see what they have, and you might be surprised. And then you can do some research, and who knows where you might find that free in your
Right.
community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I like that. I like that idea a lot. It's very
Yes.
comforting to know that we can have some participation and some control and some addition to feeding our animals without having to purchase everything. And that's very comforting to me. That is something that we all have to consider when we're getting our livestock, when we're getting our animals. We need. Monica has a theory of making sure that from birth to the table exactly how to process every single animal that you're going to have in contact with you. And to me, this is something that is very peaceful to know that if I couldn't get out to a store for any particular reason, I would still have some food to be able to feed the animals that we have. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, it's something we always should think about, I guess, really is how do we prepare ourselves if we cannot get somewhere? If we
Right.
got locked down again, how are we going to feed our animals? Because people were panicked years ago. 4 years
Right.
ago, people were buying out shelves of feed because they were in a panic that they wouldn't be able to get to it. And I remember looking at Eric going, okay, what are we going to do? And he's like, everything is taken care of. We have everything we need here to supplement our animals' feed. So worst case scenario, we have to, grow a couple extra things or do a couple extra things, but we'll be fine.
Mm.
God will handle this. But that makes so much sense.
Well, I think it's also because we always talk about on our podcast about self-sustainability and prepping your pantry for you and your family. This is just kind of a way to make sure that you're prepping the pantry for your animals on the homestead, which is something I think we sometimes overthink. And you need to, even as me as a newer homesteader, I'm like, oh my goodness, I really need to make sure that I have maybe a little bag of bird seed just in case, or I need to look more at getting the barley and the wheat so that I can do this fodder for the winter months. So this has been a great episode. I'm so excited. Sandi, with all the knowledge.
Well, sometimes we forget about our herb beds and our flower beds. And there are a lot of plants that they die back at the end of the year that I just want you to make sure you check on any flower or herb that you give to your animals, because there are a few that are exceptions and you wouldn't want to give them. So just do your research on that part. But this has been a great episode, and so exciting that this is our first one that you can see our faces. Yay! So if you're listening on one of the regular podcasts, come over to YouTube and you can meet us individually too. So we appreciate that. And this is just the best team ever. I tell you, Round the Hay Bale has just been such a blessing, and we hope that you feel that way too. Now, leave comments. If you have questions, let us know and we will help you, because that's what we're all about, community. So I guess we're going to say goodbye for today. Make sure that you check out our LinkTree and all of our past episodes. And we just thank you for today. So I'm just going to say bye for today.
Are you enjoying the Hay Bale topics? To learn more, click on the LinkTree link to get all our product recommendations, along with discount codes and more.